Hello and welcome to our presentation on the Los Angeles Dodgers baseball cards collection. Today you'll be hearing from Sabine, Sianna, Christine, and Danielle. This collection consists of Los Angeles Dodgers baseball cards that were made in the 1960s to the 1970s. There are 35 cards, all of which were created by Topps Chewing Gum and collected by David Guerrero.
Our collection decision was guided primarily by practicality. Two key factors influenced our choice. First, who amongst us had access to proper scanning or photography equipment, and second, who had a collection large enough to meet the 35-item requirement. These constraints naturally limited us to more accessible items, some of which might not typically be selected for digitization in a professional setting due to copyright concerns or non-rare items. We considered options like action hero toy cards, international postcards, and bookmarks. We liked the idea of a collection of library cards from Los Angeles, but the effort to blur ID numbers and collect them across the city made it too time-consuming. Ultimately, we chose a collection of Dodger baseball cards by Topps, spanning from 1960s to the 1970s. Interestingly, none of us are baseball experts, which turned this project into a valuable learning experience. Another important aspect we considered was our audience. We identified sports researchers and baseball fans as the primary users who would find value in this collection. With that in mind, we felt confident our collection had scholarly and research potential.
There were three major legal considerations to take into account when deciding how to handle the digitization of these baseball cards. The first was copyright. Some of the cards in this collection have copyright dates prior to the Copyright Act of 1976, which means that those cards have a copyright that stands for 95 years and has not yet elapsed. Other cards have questionable copyright dates whose copyrights may have required renewal based on the Copyright Act of 1909. If this copyright was not renewed, then the cards would be considered to be under the public domain. However, because we are unsure and to be cautious, it is best to consider the cards to be under copyright still. There are also trademark considerations to be made when digitizing baseball cards, as on these cards, the Dodgers logo, Dodgers uniform, and Topps logo have all been trademarked. Trademark violations only occur when an organization uses the trademark without permission for commerce or in ways that are likely to cause confusion. Because the baseball card scans are not being used this way, we are safe from trademark violations. Finally, we also took into account the right of publicity that players have regarding their face and name. Right of publicity only applies for commercial use, and because we are not using these scans commercially, we have not violated the right of publicity. Based on these findings, we determined that the baseball cards are fine to digitize and make available to the public. However, we may limit the collection's use to only those that are physically present in our institution.
Let's discuss standards. Before scanning, we need to define our digitization standards to ensure both quality and consistency throughout the collection. We looked at the physical characteristics of the baseball cards, their size, and what we were going to use the scans for, archival preservation versus online access. We also referred to professional guidelines from Fauci and NARA to help determine appropriate resolution and color depth. Let's dig into this a little more. Before a decision could be made, material and format needed to be analyzed. These baseball cards were printed on textured cardstock and include very fine details like small print and halftone imagery. To preserve that level of detail, we needed a higher DPI. Also, since the cards were in color, we used 24-bit color depth to accurately capture hue and saturation. It should be noted that NARA recommends 48-bit depth as an option if the collection displayed a lot of yellowing, but thankfully that was not the case for this collection. So where does that leave us? As you might have noticed, we followed two sets of professional digitization guidelines. Fauci recommends 400 to 600 DPI and 24-bit color for small format, high detail items like photographs and cards. NARA suggests 300 DPI as a baseline, but advises higher resolutions for intricate materials. Our choices align well with both sets of guidelines. We also consider the size and intended use of the scans. The cards are quite small, around 3.5 by 2.5 inches, so resolution becomes even more important. A lower resolution like 300 DPI might be fine for quick reference or web use, but it would miss some of the detail. We settled on 600 DPI as the best choice for long-term access and preservation. For high-end restoration work, 800 to 1200 DPI and 48-bit color might be used, but that wasn't necessary for our goals. We created two versions of each image. The archival masters were saved as TIFFs at 600 DPI and 24-bit color to ensure long-term preservation. These TIFFs totaled around 691 megabytes across 70 files. The TIFF master successfully captured fine detail, card texture, and the rich color of the baseball cards. For easier online use, we also created JPEG derivatives at 600 DPI, which totaled just around 57 megabytes and were prepared specifically for upload into Content DM. Overall, we found that by selecting appropriate scanning standards, we ensured that the digital images are both preservation ready and user-friendly. Following professional guidance from Faji and Nara gave us confidence that our digitized items will remain accessible, visually accurate, and useful to researchers and fans well into the future.
I'd like to briefly share the challenges our group encountered while working with Content DM and metadata entry, as well as how we resolved them. One of the first issues we faced was inconsistency in our metadata. Initially, we created a solid Excel template and divided our items equally, but once we began uploading and entering data into Content DM separately, we noticed discrepancies. To address this, we regrouped and developed a much stronger and more consistent metadata template, which helped eliminate the inconsistencies. Another major challenge was editing within the software. The project client interface was not very intuitive. We initially believed that once an item was uploaded and indexed, it could only be edited through the Content DM administration interface. Later, we discovered that the Edit Existing Items function in the project client allowed us to revisit items before approval, which improved workflow and time usage. We also encountered problems with image rotation. Even when rotated correctly on our computers, some images appeared incorrectly in the project client. Our workaround was to resave the image before uploading, though ideally the software would allow direct image rotation and not just the thumbnails. Lastly, when editing compound objects, we often had to delete and reapprove them, which sometimes left behind ghost metadata fields. Unfortunately, the only fix is to contact OCLC to request a full reindex. In summary, most of our issues were solved through group effort and communication. While this was a valuable learning experience, we found that Content DM and Project Client could benefit from major updates to improve functionality and user experience. The workflow was slowed significantly by these issues, and a more intuitive interface would make a big difference for future users.
This is a tour of our collection in its final form and a review of our metadata. We created a landing page with a brief description, and we're very happy to see that our pages were now cleared of the blank entries. For a sample of our metadata, I'll use this card for Jim Gilliam. Since he appears twice in our collection, we added a date to his title to distinguish between the two cards. We did the same for other players who appear more than once. For the object description area, most of the fields are the Devlin core elements, and we added 3 more fields for the technical metadata: the digital format, specs, and date digitized. We also removed source and contributor and used provenance instead to designate where the collection comes from. The description area describes both the front and back of the card, and we described what the images look like to provide more accessibility for users who use screen readers. Some of the controlled vocabularies we used were for the language, ISO 6362 code, type, DCMI type vocabulary, and subject. We followed the format of last name, first name used in the Library of Congress Name Authority file, and baseball card following thesaurus for graphic materials. We also added the player's position and team name. These subject fields are modeled in part on the Library of Congress's metadata template for their baseball card collection. We felt these categories would be useful for our users to discover and search our collection. We also used the relation field to designate that this player has another card in the collection, and provided the title and identifier to the related card. For the item description, we included information that was unique to the front and back of the card, such as the title, description, and identifier. The backside includes the transcript. We opted to transcribe the text under the player's bio and any captions that accompany the illustration. We decided that including the player stats would make the entry a little cluttered. Users who want information on the player's stats and biography can use baseballreference.com, which is the definitive source for searchable baseball statistics and player information. Adding player stats to our metadata would be redundant and rudimentary compared to these richer online resources. Plus, our metadata focuses on the cards in the collection, not necessarily about the players themselves. The descriptive sentences and captions, however, are unique to the cards and therefore worth transcribing.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this presentation and our collection.